Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Chinese Corner. I'd like to start by letting everyone know that this session is being recorded. Of course, this will be shared after the event on our website, which I have placed a link to in the comments. If you have any questions during today's session, please write them in the chat or into the Q&A box, and we will very happily respond to them. I think that the best way for looking at these sessions is to be as interactive as possible. So please jump in at any point with questions, and we will do our best to respond to them. Before we get to our main part of today, I would like to take a moment to introduce myself and the Confucius Institute. So my name is George, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Confucius Institute at Coventry University. And the goal and aim of the Confucius Institute is to share and promote Chinese language and culture across, in our case, the West Midlands. There are many Confucius Institutes at higher education institutions throughout the country, from Aberdeen all the way to Belfast and down quite a few in London. In Coventry University Confucius Institute, our primary function is running Mandarin Chinese classes, which Hugh is a part of, and I'm seeing in our chat that several of our attendees are also hopefully enjoying. Alongside our Mandarin classes, we also run cultural experiences and classes with local schools, and we are always aiming to support local businesses, whether that is in translation, cultural awareness, or putting into contacts and promoting contacts internationally. If you have any questions or suggestions for projects that you would like us to help out with, or if there are any cultural topics that you are interested in learning more about, please contact us at the Confucius Institute at coventry.ac.uk, or follow us on our social medias, Twitter, Insta, Facebook, at Confucius Cov Uni. So now that I've done my due diligence in promoting the Confucius Institute, I'd like to welcome our guest. Today we have Hugh.
Hello.
Welcome, Hugh.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm sure we're going to get to this in a moment, but would you like to tell us a little about yourself and how did you get involved with this?
Well, it's all part of my talk, so if you just hang on a little bit, I've got a few slides that will tell you all that as well. So I shall quite happily share my screen in a minute, and then we can get going straight away. And as part of that, I will also be introducing myself.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. So please share your screen. And again, remember, for all of our attendees, please feel free to ask any questions at any time, and I will interrupt you when possible with some interesting questions.
Right, that's fine. Good. Well, I assume you can all see my screen now, which says Learning Chinese, a Linguist's Journey. Well, I'm a linguist. You will have gathered that by now. This is me. I've got not many letters after my name, an MA for a master's and an MITI. I was born in 1955. That was many, many years ago. But I'm not retired. Okay, this is my study. This is where I'm sitting right now, by the way. Now, MA is a Master's in Linguistics, dating back quite a few years when I was 30, a bit younger than that, 25, in 1980. And MITI means I'm a member of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting. I'm a translator, not an interpreter, which means I do written work. I don't do oral work. Okay, I've been a freelance translator since 1985, and I mainly translate from German into English, but also from Dutch into English and from Russian into English. In case you're wondering why I'm giving you the Ukrainian flag here and not the Russian flag, this is because all my Russian-speaking friends are Russian speakers, but living in Ukraine, not in Russia. Okay, so that explains that. I'm married to a dear young lady, just a few years younger than me, called Sue, and here she is. That's the two of us. Right, my hobbies, well, learning Mandarin, obviously, but also learning Polish, learning about other cultures, particularly Chinese cultures, and befriending people from other cultures, and I love photography. Okay. I've got two daughters in their 30s. Both of them are married. This is our family, right? And we live in Coventry, UK. Right, now here's the overview of what I'll be talking about. I'll start off by talking about why I am actually learning Chinese. And then I'm going to share with you a number of fascinating features about the language, the phonetics, the grammatical structure, the vocabulary, and human interaction. Okay, here we go. Right, why am I learning Chinese? Well, here I am. My beard isn't quite as scruffy as that yet. I trimmed it today. Why not, first of all? Well, I have no commercial interest as a translator, please note. Why not? Because it would simply take too long. You see, I started learning Chinese using various internet courses like Chinese Pod, which is quite good, quite a long time ago. And I'm here now, and I only got as far as HSK1, which isn't huge. And thanks to the wonderful help of our Chinese tutors at the Confucius Institute, I'm hoping to pass my HSK2 this year, so you can wish me luck or pray for me. Okay. Now you can see that this will keep me occupied for many, many years to come. And maybe when I'm 95, I might be fluent. You never know. Okay, now there are three good reasons for learning this language. First of all, it's a good challenge. You see, it's a challenge to the brain because it's not in the Indo-European language tree. No, it's not. You will search for it here in vain. It's right outside it. You won't find it. And it's not here, but it's in a different group. It's in the Sino-Tibetan family of languages. Okay. Now, even Russian is still a bit similar to English. I'll give you some example. Yeah, this cat is wondering, what, really? Да ладно. Well, here's a few examples. Кот, you've guessed it, cat. Сестра, you've guessed it, sister. Сын is a son. Дочь is a doctor, and a few Latin words like academic, linguist, автомашина, календарь. I won't even explain those, right? So this is what my talk will be all about. It's an intellectual challenge because it's so different. It's also got an interesting culture. As you know, language and culture influence each other. One good example is the food culture. Now, if you look closely at this picture, you will see things like fish and meat on the table at the same time. Oh, this is something that Europeans would find very odd. I didn't find it odd. I thought it was wonderful. Salted peanuts and quail eggs, just amazing, right? So, wow, Cai really makes a lot of sense. Cai, so many different dishes, right? Another example is the singing culture in China. Supposing you hear the following conversation. Well, what do you think this might be in the context? I saw you singing with someone yesterday. Who was that? 昨天和你一起唱歌的人是谁? Would this be the picture in your mind? It's probably the wrong picture. This is more likely. You see, a Gerting, a karaoke bar. Well, we don't have anything like that here. So it really is very different. And my third reason is there are lots of wonderful people. We've got wonderful friends in China and also here in the UK, and making friends with them has been the most wonderful experience, really. Now, we're going to get on to the nitty-gritty bit now, right? Some fascinating features of the language. This is not going to be boring, I assure you. Even this phonetics and the writing system. And we've got three aspects here. Chinese tones, a limited amount of phonetic material. What do I mean by that? You will see. and actually the Chinese characters too, but I won't be saying much about that. Let's start with the tones. Now, all Chinese children even are aware of these tones. Ma, 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 ma. Right? They all learn that. That is so important, and you can't have a language without it. It's vital. It can change the meaning of a word, just like a few different vowels or consonants in English. And at first, this can be quite difficult for us to get our heads round, right? As our various Indo-European languages have something totally different. You see, we have intonation, and we'll get back to that later. Now, tones can actually distinguish between different words. Here you've got a nice word called yanjing, and it means eyes, some beautiful eyes here, right? If you pronounce it a bit differently, yanjing, it means glasses. Oh, it's okay, so do be careful with this, right? What? I can't find what. Yanjing or yanjing. Well, what can't you find? You can't find your eyes? How do you mean you can't find your own eyes? This is absurd. Right, so tones are just as important as distinctions between different vowels and consonants in other languages. Now, English is a good example for that. A lot of our Chinese friends struggle in the difference between smile and smell, right? So if you want to say to someone, I like your smile, that's a nice thing to say in English. But if you say, I like your smell, well, British people being the way they are, we tend to assume that everything is sarcastic. So if you say, I like your smell, the chances are you're actually criticizing that person for being a bit smelly. So, 不好意思, if you get that wrong, you know, embarrassing, right? I like your smell. You wouldn't want to say that, right? So, getting the tones wrong in Chinese can sometimes be fatal. 不好意思, you know, how embarrassing. Right, now assume the following question, right? 我可以问一个问题吗? Can I ask you a question? 我可以问一个问题吗? Right? 问 is the operative word. Tone down. 问. Okay? Now, supposing you accidentally pronounce it like this, 问. Well, here's a situation that can be very embarrassing. 我可以问你吗? I'm sorry, but this sadly is a request for a passionate kiss. So don't say that. Somebody might be very, very offended. Well, actually, it's also good news for Chinese speakers because you will find it much easier if you're Chinese to imitate a language with intonation. Here's an example from a different language, from German. Na, alles klar? Well, everything all right? Say it with die Arshang, with the second tone on na and klar. Try it out. Na, alles klar? Perfect. I didn't hear you, but I'm pretty sure you got that absolutely right. Whereas your British friends would have said wrongly, na, alles klar, and that's wrong. It's na, alles klar, so you find that easier. Right, now, here's an example of intonation taken from English, and I've superimposed Chinese tones onto English. Yes, 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 yes. Well, if you say yes, that means I'm bored with this topic, let's move on. If you say yes, that means go on, tell me more, I'm interested, I'm listening. But or you could say yes, that means I understand what you're saying, but what else has happened? Question mark missing. Yes, but what has this got to do with anything? Anything. So what? Okay, but now give me your next question, please. Yes. Or you might have tone number 4. Yes, meaning, oh, absolutely, definitely, it's obvious. Or maybe even, you shouldn't even be asking this question. Yes. Tone down, 4th tone. Okay, so Chinese friends, if you listen out for English intonation, German intonation, Russian intonation, whatever you're learning, you're likely to have a head start because you're more flexible. Right. Now, Chinese, of course, has its own subtleties so that you can have a combination of tone and sentence intonation. Here's an example in 你不高兴. I've been told, I believe this is true, you could say, would normally say it like this, 你不高兴, you're not happy. Why aren't you happy? You know, let's find out. Statement of a fact. But you might also just do it a bit higher and you end up like this, 你不高兴, 你不高兴, as opposed to 你不高兴, meaning you're not happy and it's a tactful question, but I've left out the question particle ma, and this is apparently possible. I find that quite interesting, and that may be quite difficult for us anyway. Okay, so a tactful question. Would you like to tell me what's wrong? Why aren't you happy? Now, Chinese, of course, isn't the only tone language. Here's a map of tone languages. In red, some are so-called pitch accent languages or languages with more simple tone systems. If you have a look, Nigeria has languages like that. One of them, well, I'll come on to that later. So we can actually, as intonation speakers, we can embarrass ourselves in lots of different countries, can't we? Right, here's an example from Yoruba. Bawo ni. The marks are not tone marks, they're pitch marks. So the wo means bottom and the ni means top. It's not ba wo ni, it's ba wo ni. Okay, so that's how are you in Yoruba, or hello, they use that, ba wo ni. So if you're a Yoruba speaker, or if you speak any of the West African languages, you've got a head start for Chinese, and I'd like to encourage you, because you're going to find it a darn sight easier than us intonation people, right? Okay, that's tones. Now, what about this thing about limited amount of phonetic material? No, I'm not being insulting here at all. Let's have a look. You see, interestingly, all Chinese syllables are built up like this. And we've got three options here. This is one of them. Could be consonant but plus vowel. Na, zhe, ge. It could be consonant plus vowel plus n or m, like hun, man. Or it could be vowel, just vowel plus n or like an, in. Okay. Or it could be like this, just a vowel, like or as in duya. Okay, or you sum it up like this. The optional ones are put in brackets, and you've always got to have a vowel, can be preceded by a consonant, or you can have a or after it, right? Now, English, by contrast, allows a lot more combinations in a syllable, like splash and splosh and splish and brush and brash and square and squish and squidgety and smart and smog and or at the end, like mumps and clumps and or LKS, like elks and whelks and nch and grunch and crunching, like Hampshire. Okay, so you can see from this that you can have these combinations in English, but not in Chinese, right? Now, some languages thrive on consonant clusters. They have a lot more than in English. You think English has a lot? Well, you can have even more. Yes, I've got the Polish flag here, and here's a phrase from Polish. Chrząszcz brzmi w Szczecinie, w Szczebrzeszynie. All together? No, don't worry. It means the beetle is buzzing among the reeds in the towns of Szczebrzeszyn. Chrząszcz brzmi w Szczecinie, w Szczebrzeszynie. Simple? Okay, so now how many potential syllables are there? In English, well, just under 16,000. You think that's not a lot? Well, in Mandarin, it's only about 12,000. 1,200, sorry, 1,200, 1,200. Now, not counting the tones, though you have to count the tones, it would be about 400. Including the tones, it would be 4 times as many, 1,600, but not all of them are implemented. So in real life, it's only about 1,200. Well, so that's 1,200 basic word shapes, not counting compounds such as Heite and 喜欢, right? Yet there are around 50,000 different characters in Chinese, and an educated person knows about 8,000. How can that be? 怎么会? Как это возможно? Yeah, okay. Now, 50,000 characters, but only 1,200 word shapes. The answer is homonyms, right? If you can't quite remember what a homonym is, well, here are a few examples. Night and night, two very different things. There, 3 different homonyms, spelt differently, different meanings. Boar and boar, just a bit more, okay? Wales, as in the Prince of Wales, who's got lots of whales in his zoo or whatever. Here's a sentence with both of them in it. Bit silly, but don't worry. Right, now in Chinese, you can get the same thing and you get different characters each time. Here are 4. Ban, 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 class, pull, scar, general. I looked them up on Google Translate. I cheated. I don't know these words. Right. So the answer is context is everything, because otherwise you get into a muddle. Now, this is only the tip of the iceberg, as the following poem illustrates. Should I read this to you? I'm sorry, I can't. This is beyond me. If I read it out, here it is. 是是是是是 是是是是是是是是是是是 and so on. I won't bore you with this, but that's how you would do it. Now, this is the translation into English. It's about the lion-eating poet in the stone den, right? These are all homonyms. In a stone den was a poet called Shishi, who was a lion addict, and he had resolved to eat 10 lions. A silly thing to do. He often went to the market to look for lions. At 10 o'clock, 10 lions had just arrived at the market. At that time, he had just arrived at the market. He saw those 10 lions, and losing his trusty arrows, he caused the 10 lions to die. He brought the corpses of the 10 lions to the stone den. The stone den was damp. He asked his servants to wipe it. After the stone den was wiped, he tried to eat those 10 lions. When he ate, he realized that those 10 lions were in fact 10 stone lion corpses. Try to explain this matter. Well, I can't. Right. We can learn 4 things from this. The first thing is pinyin, which is the writing system for Chinese in normal, ordinary Roman characters, isn't always useful. You get this? It's not useful. And Chinese and characters are actually very important. We also learned a bit about the Chinese sense of humor. It's got a wonderful sense of the absurd. We can all have a good laugh at this, can't we? And of course, context is everything. And fourthly, each word shape has an enormous number of homonyms. And we all know what they are now, and we can have a good giggle. Right. Now, of course, the Chinese has many compound words as well, consisting of more than one character. And that makes it a bit easier again, like 老师 and 学生 and 孩子. Okay, these are important, these combinations. So don't worry, the Chinese really can communicate perfectly. It's just a very, very different ballgame. It's as different as rugby and cricket. So that takes us to our third thing in this little part of our talk, the Chinese characters. You know, there are 4 words that spring to mind when I think of Chinese characters: mind-boggling, beautiful, baffling, unique, and with an ancient history behind it. Ranging from very simple like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, to this. Goodness me, how on earth? What on earth? How is that possible? Extremely complex. So, little question to our Chinese friends. I'd love to get some feedback on that. Do you think in Chinese characters in the script? Do you think in it? Do you think in it sometimes, a lot? I'd love to know. Well, Chinese characters have a special fascination because they tell a story. Here's an example. Jia. Jia means home. Now, this element at the top indicates a cave or a house. And this thing here at the bottom is that underneath there's a pig. This is an old word for a pig, to indicate prosperity and comfort, similar to today's character, which looks a bit different. It's Zhu, okay? Now, a little bit of a warning here to our friends. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, forget about our Western connotations of pigs being unclean, okay? They're not unclean. They're wonderful, lovely animals. Here's an example of a wonderful little pig, okay? And mum is laughing and grinning into the camera and everyone is having fun, right? So this character tells you of a lovely place where you can keep out of the wind and rain, where there's food inside. It has a long history behind it, hasn't it? In present day understanding, the home is still very much a place where your heart is, right? Family is extremely important. 家, 大家好 is how you might want to start when you talk to lots of people. That's how I should have started my talk. I forgot that. That means, hello everyone, hello big family, right? You love your family, of course, right? Now, the script is also a good challenge to the brain because memorizing requires a very different effort in your brain, right? You need several different things that you need to learn. Here's an example of a Chinese word. You need to have the character, right? In this case, 2 characters. You need to have the pinyin with tones like 习惯. You need to have the translation into your own language to be used to something. And you need to have an example of usage. 我现在习惯了吃西餐了. Okay, I'm not pronouncing it very well because my brain is tuned into English right now. Okay, 我现在习惯了吃西餐了. Okay, I have now got used to Western food. A Chinese person might say. Right. Now, this thing here takes a lot longer to memorize than a few grammatical forms, I can assure you. Right. So I find it helpful to look at it in a big font on my monitor. Right. The bigger, the better. This is what will fit size 287, and look at it in a different font too. It really takes an effort to memorize. Right. Now, those who learn to handwrite report that they find it much easier to memorize characters. Sadly, that doesn't include me, though perhaps I ought to do handwriting, but I'm not doing it because I've shied away from it. I'm learning, I want to learn faster, right? But it does have its advantages and it is recommended. Now, let's look at the grammatical structure. Don't switch off, this is not boring, right? Now, with most languages, grammar, the construction tools of a language, fall into 2 categories, morphology and syntax. Now, morphology is the way a word changes depending on its function, and syntax, coming on to that in a minute. So an example from English here, you add an ending, goes, going, children, men, a man, apostrophe S, toys, okay? That's the way a word changes depending on its function. Syntax is the way you arrange words in a sentence. So the old man was having lunch at home, right? Okay, you can't mess around with that. If you mess around with that, then you get something wrong. And a native speaker usually notices intuitively, without thinking even, when something is wrong in the morphology. We goes, oh no, he go, no, child's, no, those man's, no, all wrong, right? The same with the syntax. Man old at home have lunch. I can understand it, but I would never say it like that, right? So we know intuitively, right? Now, in some languages, of course, the morphology can be quite complex. Here's an example from Finnish, the word house. Okay, Finnish, by the way, is not Indo-European either, but it has this complexity. So here you have an example, a paradigm of the word talo, which means house. So you have talo, talon, talo, atalos, atalos, tatalon, talon, latalon, tatalon, letalon, atalos, italota. And that's just the singular. I don't know any Finnish, by the way. I know some Polish, and here's an example from Polish. the word to read. I read, you read, you read, we read, etc. Like czytam, czytasz, czyta, czytamy, czytajcie, czytacie, czytają. And in the past tense, czytałem, czytałem if you're male, czytałam if you're female. I read. If I was female, I would say czytałam, but I'm male, so I say czytałem. And you get the same thing repeated throughout the whole paradigm, say czytałeś, czytałaś, and so on. And you get another form here in a different aspect as well. Like I have read, it's completed. You use a different phrase, przeczytałem. And I was reading at the time, you say czytałem, and so on. I won't go into that, but you can see it's complex, right? Lots of different forms. So in Chinese, there is no morphology, right? There's just the syntax. Words never change. So Chinese grammar means syntax, does it? Are you relieved? Maybe you're relieved. Okay. Well, there may be a downside though, okay? Because morphology and syntax carry the language somehow. Does that mean that syntax is having to carry the language all on its own? Really? Well, in English, it's a bit like that. It's almost like Chinese in some ways because there isn't much. You know, if you look at Finnish, Russian, Polish, French, German, etc., English has a little bit of morphology, but not an awful lot. So if you look at a present tense paradigm, that's not like czytam, czytasz, czyta, czytamy, czytacie, czytają. You've got he, she, it goes, and that's the only bit where something changes. So word order is vital. It is in English, and it is also in Chinese. You see, here you've got a dog, a cute looking dog. We don't quite believe what it's done. The dog has bitten someone, right? Subject and object. 这只狗咬了一个人. Okay. Turn it the other way around. Someone has bitten the dog and it means something completely different, right? Can't say that. Whereas in German, that is perfectly all right. You can put the man at the beginning. Diesen Mann hat ein Hund gebissen, right? The same in Polish. Tego mężczyzna ugryzł pies, right? So in many languages, you can indicate this through the morphology. If you look at the bits in yellow, right, those are the bits that indicate that it's either subject or object, right? You can do that. So you can put the man at the beginning. You can't in English. You can't in Chinese, right? This man has been bitten by a dog. That's how you've got to do it. You have to use a passive construction. Right. What's your natural question when you see this? Who's that man reading a newspaper? Well, does this word order strike you as natural? Natural, yes. Okay, natural, maybe. Well, think again, for a Chinese person, the natural word order is quite different. Is that reading a newspaper person is who? 那个看报纸的人是谁? Very different, right? But that is the natural word order in Chinese. So let's learn to think our thoughts in a different order when we learn Chinese. Okay, so back to our question, does syntax have to carry the language all on its own? Well, no, there are lots of little helpers, right? So-called function words. Here they are. Ma, le, de, ba, ma. Okay, and they're part of the vocabulary of a language. Let's just focus quickly on one of them. Le. This tells us something about the way people think in China, and also about we Indo-Europeans think, because we have different categories and we therefore think differently. Now, le has lots of different functions. One of them is completion or state of change. Completion means something is finished. Here's an example. 你吃了吗? Have you eaten? Right? Finished. Foods, you know, have you eaten? Is your stomach full? Right? Here's another one. 别哭了. Stop crying. In other words, finish that crying. You're in the process of it. Finish it now. Here's another one. 你胖了. You've put on weight. you've changed from a state of being slim to a state of being quite maybe obese, maybe a bit more podgy. I don't know. Here's some comparison. 你吃吧, come on, you have something to eat. You can't use le there. Or 你吃了吗, have you eaten? Here's another example. 别哭, you're crying now, but you don't need to cry. 别哭了, stop crying, stop that now, right? Go from a state of crying to not crying. Or 你很胖, you're rather fat. Not very nice thing to say. 你胖了, you put on weight. Going from one state to another. That is some nuance, and it's important. Right. So le indicates a very important grammatical category. We call it completion. Now, categories can vary from one language to another. We don't have this marker in English in this form. What we have instead, we have a category called tense. Now, interestingly, all Indo-European languages have tenses, right? They have past and present. There are some that even have future, okay? And so if I have something like this, yesterday I something all day, watched TV, I had an ending, ed, that's the tense marker, played basketball, worked hard, had breakfast. But look at the Chinese now, there's no tense marker. 昨天我整天看电视. Okay, there's no, definitely don't use le because there's no completion involved. And but there's no tense, there's no need for it, absolutely no need, right? Whereas in other languages like Polish, again, you know, wczoraj przez cały dzień oglądałem telewizję, grałem w koszykówkę, ciężko pracowałem, jadłem śniadanie. Okay, you have these markers again. I've highlighted them in yellow. Now, in some languages, you even have a future, like as an example here from French and Italian. Demain, je regarderai la télé toute la journée. Domani guarderò la télé tutto il giorno. This is about the future. So you have future markers, right? Here's another grammatical category. You think it's universal, but it's not. And that is singular versus plural, one or more than one.
Hi, Phil. Sorry, I'm going to jump in just to interrupt you just for a moment. I think, apologies, fascinating so far. I'm very engaged in this one. We've had a couple of questions that I would like to put out to our chat from Phil, and thank you very much. The latest one is, what would the sentences mean without the le? I'm assuming, Phil, you were talking about the ni chulama and ni tolama, ni kulama. And Phil also asks us goes back to ask how frequently would homonyms lead to confusion in everyday Chinese or Mandarin. I think that one's probably better for our Chinese colleagues who might want to jump into the chat. I think talking Chinese humor is certainly beyond my Chinese capabilities.
Yes.
But similarly,
well, maybe just get back to this one here. Have something to eat. It would be interesting to see whether you can kind of say, 你吃了吧? 你吃饱了? I don't think you can. But the interesting one to focus on here is the middle one. Be a cool, don't cry, don't be in a state of crying. It's not the same in their perception as stop crying. Okay. I don't know that I can really answer this question very well. I think some of our Chinese teachers might be able to give a good answer to this.
Very much. This is part of why I want to interrupt in the chat there. If Yiming, Jinjin, any of our Chinese teachers would like to join in the chat to provide and answer that question, that would be greatly appreciated. And thank you. I will now step out again. Thank you. Please continue.
Shall I pick up where
Yes, please pick up where we left off. Thank you again, Phil, and everyone else. Please ask questions, and we will make sure we get to them.
Yes. Okay. Right. Well, we're getting on to another function here, another grammatical category, and that's singular versus plural. Right. I bought an apple. Right. Example from Italian: Ho comprato una mela. Chinese 我买了苹果 leaves it completely open whether you bought one or several apples. You can specify if you want to. Okay, 我买了一个 苹果, then you've specified. I bought some apples, Italian, ho comprato delle mele, or Milo Pinguo. Again, that leaves it open. You can specify if you want to, but you don't have to. The sentence itself is in itself, I think, ambiguous. Okay, so the category isn't there. You can specify if you want to, but the category is not there. So the language does not force you to specify. Right, Chinese grammar allows you to remain non-specific about this. In fact, it's not the only language that does it like that. There are others as well. Okay, good. That might take us to the vocabulary at this point, unless I ought to be interrupted at this point. Okay. When you compare two languages, words don't often match one-to-one. We know that as translators, and that is so important. Our clients often don't appreciate that. Now, here are some examples comparing English and Chinese. Okay, what do you call this? What can you see, right? Well, an English person would say, these are all drinking vessels, okay? There's a cup, a mug, a beaker, a thermos, right? We don't use the word drinking vessel much in everyday speech, do we? We say there's a mug, a cup, a glass, a thermos. What about the Chinese? Okay. Look at this. 杯子. They're all called 杯子. I believe you can specify more precisely if you want to, but why should you? Why should you if you don't have to? Just call them all 杯子. Perfectly all right. So Chinese doesn't specify here, not in everyday speech. And a lot of our Chinese friends get quite muddled between glass and cup. A glass of tea and a cup of champagne. No, there's a difference. Right, now, sometimes it's the other way around. Like, you know, you have a brother in English, but in Chinese you specify 哥哥, older brother. 弟弟, younger brother, sister, 姐姐, 妹妹, older sister, younger sister. You have to specify, okay? So you can't just leave it vague. You have to specify. But there's more to it. Granddad on dad's side, granny on dad's side, granddad on mum's side, granddad on mum's side, granny on mum's side. And this is it, just the tip of the iceberg. You can have dad's older brother, dad's younger brother, dad's older sister's brother, dad's younger sister's brother, mum's older sister's brother, and the same with the aunts. And with cousins, nephews, nieces, mothers-in-law, fathers-in-law, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law. Whew. Okay, this should tell us a lot about family relations, often a close network where roles are very, very important. Okay, close family network. 大家好. Okay, hello family, right. Another aspect of vocabulary is the picture that comes up in our mind, okay, what we associate. For instance, tea, cha. Well, what I did is I did a little search in Google Images. First, I searched kappa in Google Images. Then I searched ibe cha, and then I searched chashka chayu. Okay, they all mean. You think they all mean the same thing, but I got these pictures predominantly. Now, I'm sure you can guess which is English or British, which is Chinese, and which is Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian. Obviously, it's the bottom one, okay? Very different pictures are conjured up in your mind. So when you think tea, something different comes up in your mind. Not necessarily this. Can you see? Okay. Different things come up in your mind. This tells us a little bit about different cultures, and it's worth investigating. Right. Now, this is also true on the abstract level. Different words can conjure up different thought patterns in your mind, and this can differ from one culture to another. We'll get back to this later, comparing two words, the words old and lao. Okay. So that takes us to our final thing here, human interaction. Now, this is now the realm of pragmatics, which is also a branch of linguistics. I'm not totally sure where to draw the line. Maybe something like this. This is not sort of gospel truth, and I've not really researched it 100% either, but I think there is a line like this. And what does this line mean? Have a look, it goes straight through Germany. Isn't that interesting? You'll see in a minute. Someone offers you something and you say, would you like some more? And how might this conversation typically develop if you say, no, thank you, right? Now, I think that to the left of this line, it might develop like this. Oh, no, thanks. And the answer is silence. Or the answer might be, are you sure? And then you say, yes, I'm quite full. And the answer is silence, perhaps. Or no, that's all right. Then, you know, you have as much as you like, and that's fine. Now, on the other side of the line, would you like some more? Oh, no, no, thanks. Oh, do please have some more. Oh, all right then. Or you might go like this, oh, I'm really quite full. And then the other person might say, покушай еще. 你吃吧, ist doch noch was. Now have something more to eat, you know. The picture there is a Russian picture, by the way. And it's the picture of fish soup being served. Now, on the one side of this line, we have there is an urging culture. While on the other side of the line, there's more of a live and let live culture. It's totally, you know, as I said, I haven't 100% researched this, but I suspect this. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm happy to be proved wrong. Покушай еще. 你吃吧, ist doch noch was. Okay. Interestingly, in Germany, the line goes straight through the country. I noticed that East Germany and West Germany are quite different in that. So we have on the one side, we've got the Netherlands, western part of Germany, and on the other side, we have China, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and the eastern part of Germany. Quite interesting, this actually. So, and of course, Chinese food is irresistible. I took this photo at a hot pot a restaurant, and I found it so irresistible. I ended up with indigestion afterwards. The food was so wonderful. I had too much to eat. Well, here's a second example. What are your first words after you've said hello? Right? Well, the Brit might say, how are you? Okay, how are you? All right. Okay, that's a typical question, especially here in Coventry. You hear it all the time. All right. Germany, we've already had that. Na, alles klar. Well, everything all right. Polish, a bit different, isn't it? Co słychać? Literally, what to hear, or less literally, what's your news? Go on, share something about your life. Chinese, 你吃过了吗? Have you had a meal yet? Have you eaten? Now, this may just be the older generation. I'm not quite so sure on that. So Chinese people, please comment. And we've got one third and final example in our about human interaction. This is very different in English and again, more similar to Central and Eastern Europe. What do you say to a teacher? How do you address a teacher? Well, in the Anglophone word, you call them Jane and John. At a school, however, you say Mrs. Jones, Miss Jones, Mr. Jones. Okay, that's our etiquette here. Right, now, Jane and John would seem very odd to a Chinese person and might just seem downright offensive, calling them by their first names. But what about Poland? Pani profesor. Oh, if it's a man, panie profesorze. And if it's a school, pani nauczycielu. If it's a man, pani nauczycielko. Mr. Teacher, literally, or Mr. Professor. Very un-English, right? Okay, well, let's move a little bit in the area. Austria, this is not Germany, it's Austria. University, Herr Professor, Frau Professor. School, Herr Lehrer, Frau Lehrerin. And on a bus, you might say, Herr Busfahrer, Mr. Bus Driver. I wonder whether our Austrian friends would say to me, Herr Übersetzer, Mr. Translator. I wonder, I don't know. Well, if we go to an African country like Nigeria, in a school or university, you would say sir or ma. I asked a Nigerian friend. Well, now we're in China. What do you say there? At school and university, you would address them by their surname plus teacher, the word teacher, like Wang Lao Shi. That's the good and polite way of addressing them. Please don't scoff at it, Brits. That is a good way of addressing your teacher. You do it out of respect and out of kindness, right? So finally, we're coming to the end now. I said we'd get back to the two different connotations of these two words, old and lao. Connotations are important. What do you associate with a word when you hear it? Well, I'm very happy to be called Lao Xiu in Chinese, meaning old Hugh. Not so sure being called that in English, old Hugh. But it's fine in Chinese. It's lovely. It's a nice way, nice affectionate way of calling me something. Well, you can draw your own conclusions about this. So my main message to you, look and listen carefully to native speakers. It's the best way you can learn. Okay. Thank you for your attention. 感谢你们的关注.
Okay, thank you very much, Hugh. That was a very in-depth and fascinating talk. I appreciate the comparisons to languages other than English as well. I think that's very interesting. I know Phil has put up a question already for the end of your presentation, and I would welcome everyone else watching to put up their own questions if there is any topics they would like some further clarification or discussion. So Phil asks, how much of a threat to traditional writing and characters do you think pinyin would be in the foreseeable future, bearing in mind the prevalence and the use of mobile devices? It would be great to hear your thoughts on that, and also anyone else who wishes to put their ideas into the chat, because obviously pinyin, it's much easier, let's say, to write pinyin than it is to learn to write traditional characters.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chinese friends, but I think pinyin can also lead to a lot of confusion. And what our Chinese friends do, of course, they use pinyin input on their devices. That would be on a computer and on a mobile phone. So you type, for example, HAO, and the first word that is presented is hao, meaning good, but next to that are also various other words that are either homonyms, in other words, they're also pronounced hao, but also words that have different tones, like the word for the number, which is hao, which is a very different word. So they would also be presented, and then you've got to pick and choose the correct one, right? So only one of them is correct. If you pick the wrong one, it just doesn't look right. And my strong suspicion is that our Chinese friends, that's my question, actually think in Chinese characters quite a lot. They think in pictures because you sometimes hear them, can you see my hand doing this? Have you seen that? Have you seen Chinese people doing that, right? And they're actually spelling out a word. Oh no, I don't mean this. I mean this, right? But I'm sure there's a better answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think from my point of view, pinyin is fantastic as a learning. I mean, both for myself. I know also my daughter is has learned Chinese. She's 8. she much prefers pinyin to characters. But I think we're not going to get away from the importance of certainly being able to read and write in Chinese in, well, when we say traditional writing, I think also we should bear in mind that in mainland China, it's not, they also do not use traditional script. They use a simplified script, whereas in Hong Kong and Taiwan, there is a traditional script, which is more complex than what we see in mainland China. So traditional script is already, or has already been, under threat, but that has been for many decades. It's difficult. I think I'm getting distracted by myself there, perhaps. But simply being around anywhere you go in China, there is, if people are going to be able to read newspapers, books, anything, they are going to have to be able to read in characters, because I think the great example that Hugh used earlier with the reading in pinyin would lead to a lot of confusion. Thank you. Regina has also said the similar thing. So yes, we use pinyin on our phones, on the computers to write, but it's a fantastic one. I would like to go back, if it's okay with you, Hugh, and to broaden up to Phil's earlier question about homonyms, and I'd love to hear back from any of our Chinese colleagues, with Phil asking about the potential for humor for the homonyms. Obviously, when we're looking at humor in a language, that's a deep meaning of the culture, and it's something you have to have a very high level of awareness of both the language, the bones and of the language, and the culture to be able to really appreciate. So if any of our Chinese friends could jump in and say, is there humor around the homonyms? That would be great.
I reckon there must be, because it just lends itself to it, doesn't it? You pronounce it one way, pronounce it a little bit differently, and it's something humorous. So it would be great to have an example even of humor in this way.
I mean, we have the things that come to mind for myself. We have our similar things with, I'm not sure it's humor, but obviously the difference with ma potentially meaning mother, or horse, depending on the tone, certainly would lend itself to humor in the UK. Certainly brings to mind. This always reminds me of a family friend who's had a horse and a husband with a similar name, both called Charlie, that led to certain discussions, thinking about what they're going to do with Charlie later on. It's but I'd love to hear that later on. If there are any other questions, we are coming very much to the end, unfortunately. It is just about 1 o'clock, we're out of time. So as I think we've had all of the questions we're going to have, and we are running out of time, thank you very much for that fascinating talk, Hugh. I really enjoyed it. I think I've certainly learned to appreciate, and I think when you look at the Polish and the other languages, I couldn't try to speak, so that's fantastic. And I hope you continue to enjoy your language learning. Oops, sorry, there's a question that has just popped up. Oh no, Hazel, is a thank you from Hazel.
Okay. One little thing I forgot to mention is a big thank you to the Confucius Institute and their wonderful teachers. I've had 3 teachers so far. All 3 of them are absolutely wonderful, and I can really recommend it. It's a great way to learn. So if you happen to want to learn Chinese, the Confucius Institute is a very good way to go about it. Thank you.
Great. And Doug says, thank you, old Hugh. I think that's, I'm sure this is someone you know from outside.
Okay.
Wonderful way to finish. Thank you very much, everyone. And I will now be, and goodbye, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.